This generation, JRPG games have went through a bit of a resurgence as they're once again becoming more and more popular. And because of this, more JRPG games have been coming out in recent years for as long as I can remember. But there's been one console in specific that has really been pumping out JRPG games, whether that be third-party games or even developed in-house with their own first-party studios, and that is the Nintendo Switch. For me personally, I've always preferred my JRPG experience on a handheld console. I'm not really sure as to reason why, but to me, it's the perfect match. So now the question is, what are the best JRPG games on the Nintendo Switch? So I made a list of my own top 15, and do remember this is my personal opinion. Yours may be different, and if I missed your favorites, let me know in the comments below so others can discover those games as well. As always, I'll only be picking one game from any given franchise unless they're vastly different. But anyways, let's get right into this. At number 15 we have The Last Remnant, which is an old Xbox 360 exclusive, but even for today's standards, this game doesn't look that bad, which I think is a testament to Square Enix's art design here. Really, Square Enix has been making pretty games for a while now, but it really was shown off in all of its glory here with all of the world building and its vast world to explore. The Last Remnant really could be explained as a huge game in many ways, spanning over 60 hours, the several fantasy species you will meet, and even the unique turn-based combat and how battles can chain and grow larger as time goes on. Tokyo RPG Factory has made a bit of a reputation for themselves in recent years for making good JRPG games, but often with a few flaws, and I think I Am Setsuna is very fitting of this legacy. Has their attractive chibi art style, a deep and engaging story, and really good music, but just falls flat in a few areas. It really does have an emotional story with a fascinating premise that is about a girl who must be escorted across the world to sacrifice herself to save the world. It's a pretty heavy theme, and for this, I've seen several people fall in love with this game, and especially if you like old school JRPG games. I Am Setsuna is actually a love letter to old school JRPG games such as Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, and much like Final Fantasy, it does use an ATB turn-based combat system. If you like those type of games, then I Am Setsuna is among the best made in years, even if it does have a few flaws. The Mana games are often viewed as some of the best JRPG games ever created. And while Secret of Mana is very well known in the West for its beautiful art style and its fun combat system, somehow it's taken over 2 decades to get an official localized Trials of Mana, which is the main attraction to the Mana Collection. So in a way, the Mana Collection is new for a lot of people, even though they released it for the Super Nintendo in the early 90s, thanks to Trials of Mana's inclusion. And I have to say, it is better than Secret of Mana in every way, which is also a great game, but especially in regards to its story, which is just much better written this time around. And while yes, these are games from the 90s, they still hold up well today with their beautiful pixel art and bright, vibrant colors. Really, I do think these games boast some of the best pixel art you'll ever see. These are just gorgeous games to look at and just as fun to play. These are absolutely essential games for fans of the genre. Pokemon is pretty much known by everybody by this point, but growing up in the 90s, there is certainly more than a few that is especially attached to the original 151 Pokemon, and Pokemon Red and Blue in specific. I mean, if you grew up in the 90s, you know what I mean, and how it was such a huge phenomenon. Kids were watching the show, playing the games, wearing the clothes, and collecting the cards that would inevitably get you in trouble at school. Pokemon was everywhere, but nothing was bigger than Pokemon Red and Blue with its expansive options and turn-based combat, and to this day I think most people will look back at that time with very fond memories. Thankfully, Nintendo has once again revisited the Kanto region with these remakes, but unlike many remakes, they made some very drastic changes, both innovative and in other ways a bit stripped down. It did add things like wild Pokemon walking freely, and you can even ride on bigger Pokemon now, which is really cool to see. It isn't as deep as some of the more core games, taking away some competitive options, but overall it's a very well made game and a must play for any Pokemon fan. When you first look at Dragon Quest Builders 2, it's easy to dismiss this game as yet another Minecraft clone. But don't be fooled, because this is a legitimate JRPG game with a fun story and characters. The hack and slash combat isn't overly complex and it's a little simple, but this is possibly one of the most addicting games I've played in a very long time. You can sit there for hours completely unaware of how much time you just sank into Dragon Quest Builders 2, and while it is a JRPG with level progression and new abilities to unlock, it does have a lot more going for it with its building mechanics and how you grow a small community into something much larger. It also helps that the characters in the story always seem to remain whimsical, and most importantly, it's fun. While the RPG mechanics itself is a little light, the game as a whole package was so good that I just had to include it on this list. I really can't think of many games as unique as Valkyria Chronicles with its strategic combat. You can walk around or drive around large battlefields, which is turn-based combat to put yourself in place to wipe out enemy units, and it can be exhilarating trying to outwit your opponent with good positioning and the right tactics. There really isn't anything quite like the combat of Valkyria Chronicles, and even the art style is unique in its own way, and it's something really pretty to look at. It fits very well on the Nintendo Switch, and then there is its story, which is equally as good, making about every character interesting in certain aspects. Now, if you haven't played the previous 3 games, don't worry because Valkyria Chronicles 4 can be played as a standalone game. Much like Secret of Mana, Octopath Traveler boasts some of the best pixel art you'll ever see. But here you get this nice blend of modern day graphics as well, and how the light reflects off the water, and the entire package just has a nice glimmer to it. It's very unique and visually pleasing, but beyond its art style, it also has some of the best turn-based combat I've ever played in a JRPG game. Octopath Traveler, of course, is inspired by old school JRPG games like Final Fantasy VI, but I really like its take on combat a lot, and how each monster and character will have their own weakness that you can take advantage of, or you have to be at least paying attention to because your own characters have these weaknesses as well. Octopath Traveler also has an interesting way of telling its story, or rather I should say stories, because unlike other games, there is not one set protagonist, but instead you have 8 separate protagonists that have their own story and motives. Some characters are a little bit more interesting than others, but you can go through each story at any given time, and then you complete it at your own pace. The only thing I wish they would have done is maybe connect each character to one another a little bit more. But nonetheless, this is an amazing JRPG for old school fans, and very possibly the best of this kind in years. One of the most influential games of the 21st century is easily Dark Souls, and it once again returns, but this time to a portable console, and it looks surprisingly good here. It actually has a similar look to it as the PS360 versions, but without all of the performance issues that they carry. Back in 2011, when Dark Souls first released, it was a challenging but rewarding game with some of the best action-based combat in the industry, and that really hasn't changed even after 8 years. Each weapon is unique with different movesets and can be upgraded by farming specific enemies, but one cool addition to Dark Souls on the Nintendo Switch is the ability to pause the game in offline mode. Considering this can be played in portable mode, this is essential as you can put your game to sleep anytime you need, so you can make it a true handheld experience. Ni no Kuni is nothing short of an art of work. This game is beautiful, and well, it should be, considering the coveted Studio Ghibli teamed up with Level 5 to do the artwork, and it really shows here. From the artwork to the animations, it's as if you're playing in an anime show. Now, this game first released exclusively to the PlayStation 3, and to many it's viewed as an all-time best JRPG game, and I think as time goes on it will be remembered as such. It's got such a touching story, and right within the first hour you're going to be latched onto the characters and what's going on with their life and the world around them. You play as a child, and in many ways your adventure is like the imagination of a kid with how the characters are portrayed in its alternate dimension. It's fantasy at its best, and then there's its combat, and while it has a free-flowing combat as you can run around the battlefield, it has a real Pokemon-like aspect to it. You can catch different monsters, evolve them, and then command them in battle, but also while fighting with the protagonist. Really, this game is as good as people have been saying. It's superbly done and an experience you won't soon forget. I really hold Tales of Vesperia in high regards, and it's actually one of my favorite JRPG games ever made. It was originally an Xbox 360 exclusive, and because of this, it was a little overlooked by many fans of the genre. But with that said, it has a great story with some of the best cast of characters in any video game that I can recall. Each and every character is so well done, but one thing that I see happen often in games is a lack of chemistry among the cast, which is something that Tales of Vesperia shines in. It's like a good show. When the cast of characters has a strong bond and chemistry, such as something like Friends, a lot of people are drawn to it for that reason alone, whether they realize it or not. The story itself is good too, and I think it's something that you will be invested in from the get-go. It also has a timeless art style to it and looks fantastic on the Nintendo Switch, and of course the combat is fun as you adventure through the world and then engage in sort of a freeform combat. It's not overly complex, but it's fun nonetheless. I think if you really like a good story in JRPG games though, then there isn't much better than Tales of Vesperia. XENOBLADE 2 is a massive game, and has pretty much everything you would want in a good JRPG. It has this big world to explore, the combat is both unique and fun, the characters are well done, it has a captivating story, and the art style is just mesmerizing with these big landscapes that surround you. It has some really good world building too, as the world is based on colossal giants that the inhabitants actually live on. It's really cool to see the way the world moves as you live on these creatures. And then there is the story that has you following the life of the young protagonist Rex. At first he just seems to be an ordinary boy trying to make some money to survive, but then as fate so often can be unpredictable, he becomes connected with a powerful weapon, which is also a living being, an Aegis. This is where the story truly begins as your bond grows and you keep her from all the evils of the world, but it's such a fun game with charming characters and a good story. I believe this is an absolute essential game for any Switch owner that likes the RPG genre. For many people, Fire Emblem Three Houses has been their first Fire Emblem game, and I think that is for good reason because there is a lot to like with this game. At the beginning of Fire Emblem, you get to choose one of the three houses within the school Harry Potter style, and whichever decision you make will impact the story you're told, and what characters you'll get to know. In a way, Three Houses is much like buying 3 games in one, and the crazy thing is, each separate story is about 50 hours long, which would make this game 150 hours. That's just absolutely crazy to think about if you want to go through each one. But instead of being a student like in Harry Potter, you're instead the professor and will be in charge of your class to teach students. You will then be on school campus where you can socialize, build your relationship, and help students meet their goals. It's very Persona-esque with all the social aspects, but then there is the actual combat, which is like playing a game of chess, especially on hard difficulty with permadeath. There's so much strategy you can use, and you need to make each decision with thought to outduel your opponents. This game is good in all facets, and it's why I consider it to be one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch. It always baffles me that somehow Dragon Quest has not taken off in the West, but remains an insanely popular phenomenon in Japan, and it's not just because of the differing tastes of the two regions. Dragon Quest to this day is one of the best turn-based JRPG franchises ever, sporting Toriyama's artwork, which is most well known for his work with the Dragon Ball franchise. And Dragon Quest XI in specific could very well be considered the best game in the already great franchise. While a lot of JRPG games have been opting out of the turn-based combat for a more action-packed experience, Dragon Quest XI has stuck with its roots in favor of the more traditional combat. In fact, in the Nintendo Switch version, you can actually choose to play it in 2D like the old school games, if you so desire. And that is only a little of the extra content that the Nintendo Switch version got, which is why it is the best place without question to play Dragon Quest XI, and that is the Nintendo Switch. And I haven't even got started with the story and its characters, which will exceed all of your expectations. Dragon Quest XI is a great game and definitely deserving of a playthrough. There's just something about Platinum Games that I absolutely love, and once again they've made yet another game that will be remembered for years. When you first start playing Astral Chain, it comes off as an action beat-em-up game, but that's only on the surface, and as the game opens up, you start to see it expand more into an RPG with real depth. The game itself is about two cops fighting off an alien enemy that has taken over the world, and to stop this unseen enemy, you must take control of a powerful weapon, a Legion, which you can then use in combat. This Legion can be upgraded the way you want, and as you take control of both the Legion and the protagonist, the combat can be so much fun with several different tactics to deal with your enemies. The story itself is also well done, and I actually think that Astral Chain may be the best looking game on the Nintendo Switch. It's a little hard to show this through a YouTube video, but when you see this in real time, it really pops off screen with all of the colors. But what this game truly excels at is its combat. If you're ever looking for an action-based JRPG game, Astral Chain is among the best with a gorgeous art style, fun combat, and a good story. Number 1 has to be none other than Final Fantasy. But choosing the best Final Fantasy is an almost impossible task to take, as each one of these can be considered the best in some shape or form. So I cheated a little bit on this one, and I decided to go with all of them instead. Maybe I'll try to rank these individually in a future video, but what I can say right now is that Final Fantasy as a franchise has stood the test of time and really defines the JRPG genre as a whole. And whether you choose 7, 8, 9, 10, or 12, which are all available on the Switch, you can't go wrong with any of them. What each title does so well is their story and the characters, which are unforgettable experiences, and I think this is why people still talk about these games decades later after they released. Plus, the combat is always top of its class. Final Fantasy, however, has been known to play with its gameplay formula, so depending on what playstyle you like the most can also affect which game is your personal favorite. While 7, 9, and 10 are a little bit more on the traditional side of things, 8 and 12 shakes up the combat in several different ways, which may be one reason those two can be a little bit more divisive than the other installments in the franchise. Nonetheless, all of these games are amazing and can easily be considered not just the best JRPG on not only the Nintendo Switch, but of all time. There is a reason so many games are heavily inspired by the Final Fantasy franchise. Anyways though, that is it for this video, but if I forgot anything that you like, let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well as the little bell notification button. But anyways, peace out.